James had always been an explorer at heart. He had traveled across many planets, visiting alien species, studying their cultures, and helping out where needed. His latest assignment had brought him to an uncharted planet on the edge of the galaxy. He was a freelance translator, helping with communication between two alien factions that had been at odds for centuries. But the planet's beauty and the calm atmosphere were nothing like the chaotic world he'd left behind. It felt peaceful, almost serene, and James could feel that he was on the brink of something new. The town he had landed in was small, with tall, slender buildings made of shimmering stone. The streets were lined with exotic trees and plants, and the air smelled sweet, like fresh flowers. The local inhabitants were humanoid, but had features that made them clearly different from humans. Their skin had a faint glow to it, a soft blue hue that shimmered in the light of the planet's twin suns. Their eyes were larger than humans, a deep silver color that sparkled like stars. James had been welcomed with open arms by the local leaders, who were eager to show off their advancements in technology and their peaceful way of life. One evening, after a long day of discussions, he was invited to a casual dinner at a local home. The host was a woman named Leora, known for her grace, intelligence, and beauty. She was respected by everyone in the town, and when she entered the room, it was as if the air shifted in her presence. She had long flowing hair that shimmered like silver threads, and her pale blue skin seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Leora's daughter, Tia, was the center of attention during the meal. She was a small girl, no more than 5 or 6, with wide, curious eyes and a bubbly personality. Tia was fascinated by James, as she had never met a human before. Throughout the evening, she would ask him questions about Earth, his life, and his travels. James found her energy infectious. He couldn't help but smile as she told him stories of her own adventures around the town, often embellishing them in the most imaginative ways. At one point, as James was talking with Leora about the differences between human and alien cultures, Tia suddenly tugged on his sleeve, pulling his attention away from the conversation. Her big eyes looked up at him, and in her innocent voice she asked, "Please marry my mom." No. The room fell silent. James blinked, unsure of how to respond. He looked at Leora, who was staring at Tia with a mix of surprise and embarrassment. Her cheeks turned a soft shade of pink, and she quickly looked down at her plate. Tia, completely unaware of the awkwardness she had caused, smiled brightly and added, "She's really nice. She takes care of me, and I think she'd be happy if you were her husband." James was taken aback. Marrying an alien woman wasn't something he had ever considered, especially not as casually as this. He cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. I'm flattered, Tia, but, I don't know if that's something I can do. I barely know you both." Leora, still blushing, reached over to gently pat Tia's hand. "Tia, dear, we've talked about this before. Know that marriage is not something you can just ask someone to do on a whim." But Tia was insistent. "But, Mama, he's nice. And he could help us. He could protect us, like he protects people on his planet." James chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension. "I don't protect people like I'm some sort of hero. I just help where I can." Leora quickly stood up, her graceful movements a stark contrast to the awkwardness of the moment. "I apologize, James. Tia doesn't understand these things. She's young, and ... Double quotes, James waved his hand, stopping her. "It's okay. I wasn't offended. It's just ... unexpected. That's all." The rest of the evening passed in an almost uncomfortable silence. James couldn't help but wonder about the relationship between Leora and her daughter. From what little he knew, it seemed as though Leora had raised Tia on her own. There was no mention of a father, and Tia's casual request to have James marry her mother seemed to hint at a deeper desire for a family, for something more than just the two of them. James couldn't deny that there was something endearing about their bond, but he wasn't sure if he could offer them what they needed, as the meal came to an end. Leora escorted James to the door. Tia gave him a big hug before he left, and he promised to see her again soon. "Thank you for the dinner," he said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the entire situation. "And, tell Tia I'll think about her offer." Leora smiled softly. Don't feel pressured, James. She has a tendency to say the most unexpected things. James chuckled, a little nervous. I'm sure she does. She's a sweet kid. As he walked back to his quarters, James couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. It wasn't just the suddenness of Tia's request. It was the way Leora had looked at him. There had been something in her eyes, something almost like hope mixed with hesitation. He wasn't sure what it meant. But he couldn't help but wonder if Tia's request was more than just a childish plea. It was a reflection of something deeper. Something that Leora might have been longing for herself. James sat on his bed that night, staring out at the twin moons in the sky. His mind raced with questions. Was there a deeper meaning behind Tia's innocent words? Did Leora really want him to marry her? Or was she simply being polite, trying to laugh off a situation that had gotten too uncomfortable? And, more importantly, did he want to be part of their world in such a personal way? The soft light of the moons bathed the room in a calming glow. James let out a deep breath, feeling more confused than ever. But one thing was clear: his time on this peaceful planet had just taken a turn he hadn't expected. The days following the awkward dinner were a whirlwind of thoughts and feelings for James. As a freelance translator, he had visited many planets, met many species, and been a part of countless diplomatic talks. But this planet, with its peaceful people and breathtaking landscapes, felt different. He hadn't expected the unexpected moment with Tia, her innocent request for him to marry. Her mother, Leora, had left him unsettled. Even though he tried to laugh it off, James found himself thinking about Leora more than he intended. She was elegant, intelligent, and kind, but there was something else about her that drew him in. Her quiet strength was evident in the way she interacted with her daughter. Despite being a single mother on a world where family was so important, Leora held herself with grace. James couldn't help but admire her, but he still wasn't sure if he could be the man she needed. The next morning, Leora invited James to accompany her and Tia on a walk through the town. The air was crisp and fresh, and the streets were quiet, as most of the inhabitants were going about their daily tasks. The town was built on a hill, offering stunning views of the valley below, where the shimmering rivers wound like silver threads through the green fields. Tia was, as usual, full of energy, darting from one spot to another, asking James endless questions about Earth and the human way of life. "What's it like to live on a planet with only one sun?" she asked, her silver eyes wide with curiosity. "Do you have flying cars? I bet they're really fast." James laughed at her enthusiasm. "We don't have flying cars, at least not like you might think. But we do have some pretty cool technology. We even have spaceships that can take us to other planets." Tia's eyes sparkled at the idea of space travel. "You mean you could visit other planets? That's amazing. Should take me with you one day." James couldn't help but smile. "Maybe one day, Tia. Maybe one day." Leora, who had been walking beside them in silence, smiled at the exchange but seemed lost in her own thoughts. There was a distant look in her eyes, as if she were somewhere far away, thinking about something that troubled her. James couldn't help but wonder what was on her mind. He had gotten to know her a little over the past few days, but there was so much more to her than she let on. He had a feeling that she was carrying a burden, something that weighed heavily on her heart. After a while, they reached a quiet area near the edge of the town, where the trees grew taller and the air smelled of fresh pine. Leora suggested they sit and take a break. As they sat on a bench, Tia immediately ran off to explore the area, leaving James and Leora alone. James noticed that Leora looked a bit tired, as if the weight of her thoughts was wearing her down. He turned to her. "Leora, is everything okay? You've been quiet since we left the house?" Leora hesitated for a moment before she spoke. "I'm fine, James. Just ... thinking." She glanced over at Tia, who was happily running around, chasing small creatures that fluttered in the air. "Tia is growing up so fast, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for her. I'm raising her on my own, and sometimes I wonder if I'm enough." James frowned, his heart going out to her. He could see how much she cared for Tia and how much she wanted to give her daughter a good life. "You're doing the best you can, Leora. Tia adores you." I can see that in the way she looks at you. You're a great mother. Leora smiled softly but shook her head. It's not just about being a mother. It's about providing her with a future. She deserves to have a complete family, not just me. I want her to have a father figure, someone who can teach her the things I can't. But it's hard, my people. ... We value family, and I know it's not easy to raise a child on your own here. James felt a lump form in his throat. He understood the pressure Leora was feeling. On Earth, things weren't always easy either. Families could be broken, and single parents often struggled to give their children everything they needed. Leora's situation seemed different. She wasn't just raising Tia alone. She was doing so in a society that placed a great deal of importance on family bonds. You don't have to do it alone, Leora, James said quietly. You've got people who care about you. And Tia, she's a lucky girl to have a mother. Like you, Leora smiled. But there was a sadness in her eyes. I know you're just being kind, James, but it's not that simple. Can't just ask someone to step into our lives. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to Tia. James understood what she was saying. He had been trying to help her, trying to find a way to ease the burden she was carrying, but he realized that some things couldn't be fixed with a few kind words. Leora had her own battles to fight, and she needed to find her own peace with the choices she made for her daughter. The two of them sat in silence for a while, watching Tia as she explored the quiet forest. The breeze gently swayed the trees, and the soft chirping of distant creatures filled the air. James was lost in thought when Tia suddenly ran back toward them, her face lit up with excitement. James, James, she called. Come look. Found something cool? James stood up, smiling at her enthusiasm. What did you find, Tia? She led him to a small clearing where a cluster of glowing stones lay on the ground. They shimmered with a soft, otherworldly light, and James couldn't help but marvel at their beauty. Tia proudly pointed at them. Look, I think they're magical. Leora chuckled softly from behind him. Those are just bioluminescent stones, Tia. They glow in the dark, but they're not magical. Tia pouted for a moment, but then her face lit up again. Well, they're still cool. James laughed and knelt beside her. They're very cool. Thanks for showing me, Tia. As they walked back to the town, James couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth in his chest. He had come to this planet thinking it would be just another assignment, another job. But now he found himself attached to both Leora and Tia. There was something special about them, something that made him want to stay, to be a part of their lives. But deep down, James knew that things were never as simple as they seemed. There were questions he still needed to answer, questions about his own feelings and what kind of life he could offer them. Tia's innocent request still echoed in his mind. Please marry my mom. It wasn't just a child's wish. It was a desire for something more. Something James wasn't sure he could provide. The next few days passed in a blur for James. He had been spending more time with Leora and Tia, trying to get a better understanding of their lives and the quiet, peaceful world they inhabited. It wasn't that James didn't enjoy their company. On the contrary, he found himself looking forward to their time together. It was just that every time Tia mentioned the idea of him marrying her mother, he couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. He had never thought much about relationships in the way that Tia seemed to expect. Leora was an enigma, a beautiful and intelligent woman who held herself with such quiet grace. She was always calm and composed, but James could see the small moments when her mask slipped, when the weight of her responsibilities and her past became too much. It was during one of their walks in the town when she opened up a little more about her life, and James began to see the full depth of her struggles. They were walking along a small dirt path that led toward the river, Tia running ahead, her laughter echoing through the trees. Leora was quiet beside James, her expression thoughtful as she watched her daughter play. James glanced at her, noticing the way she held herself, as if she were carrying an invisible burden. I've never asked you about your past, Leora, James said, breaking the silence. I mean, I've heard bits and pieces, but I'd like to know more, if you're comfortable with it. Leora smiled softly, her eyes distant as she glanced at him. I'm not one to talk much about it, but I suppose you've been kind to us. You deserve to know, I suppose." She paused for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "Before Tia was born, I had a different life.
Oh,
I was part of a family. Not my own, but the kind of family you would call chosen. My people, we don't marry the way humans do. We form bonds that are ... complicated. But when I had Tia, I thought everything would change. I thought I'd be able to create a family that was whole with her father by my side." James listened intently, sensing that there was more to the story than she was letting on. "What happened?" he asked gently. Leora's eyes darkened for a moment. "The man I thought I would be with ... he was taken from me. Not by death, but by something worse. He was part of a larger conflict, and we were forced to separate. I raised Tia alone. For a long time I thought it would be enough, that I could give her everything she needed." She turned to James, her silver eyes meeting his. "But the world doesn't always work that way. It's hard to be a single mother here. People look at us, and they don't see a family. They see a mother and a child, and that's all." James was silent for a moment, processing her words. He understood now the weight of what she was carrying. It wasn't just the pressure of raising Tia alone, it was the pressure of a society that didn't support single parents in the same way that humans did. "I never realized," James said softly. I thought everyone had a choice in these things." Leora chuckled quietly. "I suppose we all think that way, don't we? But in the end, choices are limited by the world we live in. I'm grateful for Tia. She's the light of my life, but sometimes I wish she didn't have to grow up without a father." Tia, who had been playing in the distance, suddenly ran back to them, her energy contagious. "Mama, James, look what I found." She held up a small, shimmering rock, grinning widely. Leora's face softened, and she reached out to take the rock from her daughter's hand. "That's lovely, Tia," she said, her voice warm with affection. James smiled at the interaction, but in his heart he felt conflicted. He understood Leora's longing. He understood the quiet wish she had to see her daughter grow up with a sense of completeness, with both a mother and a father. He could feel that she wanted more. It's more than just a life of duty and quiet sacrifice. Tia's persistent questions about marriage still lingered in his mind. He had tried to brush them off, but the more time he spent with Leora, the more he wondered if there was something more to her request. He wasn't sure what role he could play in their lives, but a part of him felt drawn to them, as if their world, their quiet existence, was slowly becoming his own. As the evening approached, they returned to Leora's home, a simple dwelling built from the natural materials of the planet. The house had a cozy, welcoming feel, with warm, soft lighting and a few plants that Leora had grown herself. It wasn't large, but it was perfect for the two of them. Tia immediately ran to her room to play with her new rock, leaving James and Leora alone in the living area. Leora began to prepare dinner, the smell of herbs and fresh vegetables filling the air. James watched her for a moment, noticing how naturally she moved, as if everything she did was part of a well-rehearsed routine. "Do you ever wish things were different?"
ow.
James asked suddenly. "Do you ever wish you could have the kind of life that other people take for granted?" Leora paused in her task, her back turned to him. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling. "I used to all the time," she said quietly. "But that was before Tia. She changed everything for me. Now all I care about is her. But that doesn't mean I don't have dreams. Dreams that feel impossible sometimes." James was silent, understanding her pain. He could see the longing in her eyes, the desire for something more. But he wasn't sure if he could be the one to give that to her. He wasn't sure if he was even capable of being the man they needed. The evening was peaceful, but the tension between them lingered in the air. As they sat down to eat, Tia chirped happily about her new rock, and Leora smiled, but her eyes were still distant. Lost in thought, James found himself thinking more and more about their request. Was he capable of becoming a part of their world? Could he offer them the future they seemed to want so desperately? Or was he just a passing traveler, here for a short time, not meant to stay? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as they finished their meal in quiet companionship. James wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, he found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could be a part of theirs. The following days passed by, and James continued his life on the planet, caught between his duties and the growing connection he felt with Leora and Tia. Every day he spent more time with them, learning more about their world and their culture. The peaceful atmosphere, the beauty of the planet, and the kindness of its people had slowly begun to feel like home. But there was still a lingering question in James's mind. Could he truly become part of this new life, this new family? Tia's innocent request for him to marry her mother continued to echo in his mind. He had tried to push it aside, to brush it off as a child's fantasy. But the more he spent time with Leora, the more he realized that it wasn't just Ti's wish, it was Leora's hope as well. He had seen the quiet longing in her eyes, the unspoken wish for a companion, for a partner. He had seen it in the way she interacted with Tia. It's the way she carried the weight of raising her alone. One afternoon, while James was sitting outside, on the porch, enjoying the warmth of the planet's twin suns, Leora came to sit beside him. Tia was off playing nearby, lost in her own world of imagination. Leora looked at James for a moment before speaking, her voice soft but filled with determination. "James," she began, "I need to talk to you about something. It's been on my mind for a while, and I think it's time I finally say it."
James
turned to her, his heart skipping a beat. "What is it, Leora?" "You know you can talk to me." She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking about ... everything. About Tia, about my life here, and about you." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "Tia has been asking about you a lot, about the idea of you staying here, and, well, I think you can guess what she wants. But I need to know something, James. I need to know if you're here because you care for us, or if you're just passing through, as you always have." James felt a pang in his chest. He knew what she was asking. She wasn't just asking if he cared about them as friends. She was asking if he could see a future with them, if he could become the partner she had always hoped for, the father figure that Tia needed. It was a question that James wasn't sure how to answer. "I care for you both," James said quietly, "more than I ever expected. But Leora, this is all new to me. I've never thought about settling down, about being part of a family. My life has always been about moving from one place to the next. I never imagined I'd be here in a place like this, with you and Tia." Leora's expression softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I understand," she said gently. "I know that what I'm asking is a lot. I know that you didn't come here looking for a family, looking for a partner. But the truth is, I can't give Tia the kind of life I want for her without someone by my side. And I don't just mean a father, James. I mean someone who will stand beside me, someone who will help raise her, someone who will be part of our world." James looked at Leora, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had never considered what it would mean to be a father, especially not to an alien child. He had never thought about what it would take to build a life with someone, to form a bond that wasn't just about physical attraction, but about building something lasting and meaningful. "I don't know if I can be that person for you, Leora," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can offer you the life you want, the life you deserve." Leora looked at him for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face, as if she could read every thought in his mind. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, James. I'm asking you to be present. I'm asking you to be here, with us, to be a part of our lives. That's all. I don't need you to fix everything. I just need you to try." James felt a knot tighten in his chest. The simplicity of her request was both heartbreaking and beautiful. It was all she wanted, someone who would try, someone who would be there, someone who would give them the stability they had been missing. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was unworthy of such a request. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," James admitted. "I don't know if I'm the right person for you and Tia." Leora smiled softly, her hand reaching out to rest on his. "You don't have to be ready, James. No one ever is. But sometimes we find ourselves in places we never expected, with people we never thought we'd meet. And we make the best of it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of Ti's laughter floated through the air, reminding James of the joy and innocence that still existed in the world. He could see the bond between mother and daughter, the love they shared, and he realized that maybe, just maybe, he could be a part of that. Maybe he could learn to be the person they needed him to be. "I need time to think, Leora," James said at last, his voice firm but gentle. "I need time to figure out what this all means. But I want to try. I want to be here. For you and for Tia." Leora's smile widened, and for the first time in days, James saw the hope that had been hidden behind her reserved exterior. "That's all I'm asking, James. Just ... try. That's all I can ask for." They sat in silence for a while, watching Tia as she ran across the field, her energy and joy contagious. James found himself wondering what his future would look like, what kind of life he could build here with Leora and Tia. It wasn't going to be easy. He knew that. But the idea of being part of their world, of helping raise Tia and being there for Leora, felt like something worth fighting for. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the land, James made a decision. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he was willing to take the first step. For Leora, for Tia, and for the family they could become. The next few weeks were a turning point for James. He had spent a lot of time reflecting on his feelings and the conversations he had with Leora. Every moment he spent with her and Tia, every day they shared, made him realize something deeper. He was drawn to them, not just as friends, but as a family. And though he still felt uncertain, he understood that he couldn't ignore the connection that was growing between them. Leora had been patient, giving him the space he needed to think things over. She never pushed him to make a decision, but her quiet hope was always there, just beneath the surface. And Tia, with her innocent charm, continued to bring joy and energy to their lives. She was a reminder of everything that was good in their world, a world that James was beginning to feel a part of. It was one bright morning, as they walked along the same dirt path by the river, that James knew what he had to do. The town was peaceful as always, and the sun shone brightly on the sparkling waters below. Tia, who was skipping ahead, paused for a moment, turning back to look at James and Leora. "Are we going to play today, Mama?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. Leora smiled warmly at her daughter, nodding. "We will, sweetie. But first we have something to talk about." Tia's curious eyes turned to James. "What are you going to talk about?" she asked innocently. James chuckled, his heart swelling at how genuinely curious Tia was about everything in life. "It's something important," he said with a smile. "Something that I've been thinking about a lot." Leora gave him a soft glance, and for a brief moment their eyes locked. James took a deep breath and stopped walking, turning to face Leora. "Leora," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about everything, about what you asked of me, about Tia's request, about being here in this place with you both." Leora's expression softened, and she stepped closer. "James, you don't have to answer right away. You've taken time to think, and I appreciate that more than you know." But James shook his head. "No, I've had enough time. Realize something important." Leora's eyes widened slightly, and she waited, her breath held in anticipation. "I want to be here," James said firmly. "I want to be a part of your lives. I want to help raise Tia. I don't know if I'll be the perfect father or the perfect partner, but I know I want to try, for both of you." Leora's eyes filled with emotion. She took a step back, as if trying to process the weight of his words. "You're sure?" she asked softly. James nodded, his voice steady. "I'm sure. I've spent enough time thinking about it, and I know that this is what I want. I want to be here with you, and for Tia." Tia, who had been patiently waiting, suddenly ran up to them, her eyes wide with excitement. "What did you say? What did James say, Mama?" Leora bent down to Tia's level, her hands gently resting on her daughter's shoulders. "James said he wants to stay with us," she said, her voice filled with warmth. Tia's face lit up with a wide smile. "Really? Does that mean you're going to marry Mama?" James chuckled softly at her excitement. "I don't know about that yet, Tia, but I'm going to be here with both of you. And that's what matters." Tia's eyes sparkled. "Yay!" she shouted, throwing her arms around James in a big hug. James laughed, hugging her back, feeling the joy and warmth that filled his chest. It was the first time in a long while that he felt so certain of his decision. Leora watched them with a gentle smile, a mixture of relief and happiness in her expression. She had never imagined this moment, but now that it was happening, it felt like a dream come true. She had spent so many years raising Tia on her own, unsure of what the future held. And now, suddenly, the possibility of a future with James felt like something real, something worth fighting for. As they continued their walk, James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had made his decision, and though the future was still uncertain, he felt ready to face it. He was no longer just a traveler passing through. He was part of something, part of a family. And for the first time in a long while, that thought brought him peace. The next few days were filled with small moments of joy and connection. James spent more time with Tia, helping her with her studies and playing games. Leora and James had quiet conversations about their pasts, their hopes for the future, and what it would mean for them to become a family. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of uncertainty, but the bond between them was growing stronger with every passing day. One evening, as they sat together for dinner, Tia looked up at James and Leora with a serious expression. On her face, "When you two get married, will we all live together?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. Leora and James shared a quiet laugh at Tia's directness. "We'll see, sweetie," Leora said gently. "Marriage is something that takes time, but we're already a family, and that's what matters." Tia nodded seriously, as if understanding more than her young age would suggest. "Okay," she said, before turning her attention back to her meal. James and Leora exchanged a smile. They both knew that Tia's question, innocent as it was, carried more weight than she probably realized. It was a question about the future, about what kind of life they would build together. And though neither of them had all the answers yet, they were willing to figure it out together as the days turned into weeks. James continued to grow closer to both Leora and Tia. They spent time exploring the town, meeting new people, and enjoying the peaceful life of their planet. James was no longer just a visitor. He was part of something bigger, something that felt right. And though he still had doubts about the future, he knew one thing for certain. He had made the right choice. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, James turned to Leora, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you." Leora smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "And I want to face it with you, James." Tia, who had been sitting between them, looked up at them with a grin. "I think you two are going to be great together," she said simply. And in that moment, with the soft glow of the setting sun painting the sky, James realized that no matter what came next, they were already a family. Life continued to settle into a new rhythm for James, Leora, and Tia. The days passed with the comfort of routine, but James could sense that both Leora and Tia had started to build expectations. He had made the decision to stay, to be part of their world, and though he was still uncertain about what the future would hold, he knew that he could not turn back. This wasn't just about being a visitor anymore. It was about being a part of something much bigger. James had spent more time in the village, becoming familiar with the quiet, peaceful life that the planet offered. The community was small, but the people were warm and welcoming. He had started to learn the local customs, and though his knowledge of their language was still limited, he was getting better at communicating. Leora had been patient with him, teaching him the intricacies of their culture and how things worked on their world. Tia, as always, was full of energy and excitement. She had begun to see James not only as a friend, but as someone who could be a stable part of her life. She would ask him endless questions about Earth, about how humans lived, and what kind of things he did when he wasn't busy helping others. James had told her stories of his travels, of the adventures he had had, but he found that he enjoyed hearing her stories even more. The way she saw the world so full of wonder and imagination reminded him of the simplicity of childhood. One afternoon, James and Tia were playing outside while Leora prepared dinner. They had spent the day exploring the nearby forest, collecting strange but beautiful rocks and flowers that Tia insisted were magical. They sat on the grass, laughing and joking, when Tia suddenly turned to him with a serious expression on her face. "James," she said, her voice unusually quiet for a moment, "do you think Mama will ever be happy?" James was taken off guard by the question. Tia was just a child, but her wisdom often surprised him. He had always admired the way she could see the world in a way that was both innocent and profound. He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to answer. "I think your mama is happy," Tia, James said softly, his voice filled with reassurance. "But I think she wants something more, too. She wants the kind of family that can be together, that can support each other through everything." Nodded slowly, her brow furrowed as if she were deep in thought. "Do you think you could be part of that family?" she asked, her gaze intense. James's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected Tia to ask such a question, but he knew that the answer was important. "I want to be part of your family, Tia. I really do. I'm trying to be someone your mama can count on. But sometimes these things take time." Tia smiled, satisfied with his answer. "I think you're already part of our family," she said with a grin. "And I think Mama loves you too." James's face softened, and he chuckled. "Maybe so, Tia, but let's not rush anything, okay?" Tia gave him a playful look. "Okay, James, but I already know what's going to happen." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? What's that?" "I think you and Mama are going to get married," she declared confidently, her voice filled with childish certainty. James laughed, shaking his head. "I think you're getting ahead of yourself there, kiddo." Tia just giggled and ran off to show her mother the flowers they had picked, leaving James to reflect on their conversation. As much as he enjoyed spending time with Tia, he also understood that there were deeper emotions at play, emotions he hadn't fully dealt with. Tia saw the world in a way that was simple and untainted by doubt, and it was hard not to get caught up in her optimism. But James couldn't help but wonder if he was truly ready to commit to this new life, to this new family. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Leora noticed the look on James's face. He had been quieter than usual, lost in his own thoughts. Tia was chattering excitedly about the flowers they had found, and Leora smiled as she listened to her daughter. But she also noticed James's silence. "Is everything all right?" asked her, voice gentle. James looked up from his plate, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just ... thinking." Leora raised an eyebrow, sensing that something was on his mind. "About what?" James hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to share his thoughts. He had always prided himself on being independent, on being able to handle things on his own. But being part of a family was different. It meant sharing those thoughts, those concerns, with the people who cared about him. "I'm just thinking about everything," James said, his voice low. "I'm still trying to figure out where I fit in all of this. Never expected to be here with you and Tia, but I want to be here. Want to make this work." Leora listened quietly, her expression softening. "I know it's not easy. This is new for both of us. But James, I don't expect you to have all the answers. Just need you to be here, and that's enough for me." James met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. Leora didn't expect perfection from him. She didn't expect him to have everything figured out. She just wanted him to be present, to be part of their lives. That was something he could do. "I want to be here, Leora," James said, his voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere." Leora's eyes softened, and a small smile spread across her face. "I'm glad to hear that." Tia, who had been listening in on the conversation, suddenly piped up. "See, Mama, I told you James would be part of our family." James chuckled, his heart warmed by the simple joy in Tia's voice. "All right, Tia," he said. "Maybe you were right after all." As they finished their meal, James felt a growing sense of belonging. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future would bring. But for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And with Leora and Tia by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The next few days were filled with laughter and moments of joy. Tia had taken it upon herself to teach James more about the customs of their people, and Leora continued to share her knowledge of the planet and its history. They spent their days together, building memories and learning about one another ways that were both simple and profound, and though James knew that there would be challenges ahead, he also knew that he was ready to face them together.